and
That's
we'll
good.
get started.
Looks like it
So,
might just be us today.
might just be. Um,
Uh,
yeah, I'm not sure. I know that Doc Rice told me he had had a really tough week, so I can't remember if that was part of he was saying he wasn't going to be here tonight or if he just needed extra time on something. I can't remember. Anyway, so I thought I'd start out with a question with what did you learn about Providence Park from doing the stakeholder map assignment? So either from the research that you did on it or from just doing the actual assignment itself. So
Well, I think uh, it has a good probability for success in addressing a problem that is plagued kind of society as we've come to form it, which is, the homeless and how we integrate and correct those issues. I know that they're still they've secured quite a bit of funding so far, and they're in their preliminary stages because when you pull it up on Google Maps and you see they haven't even started cutting out the trees or laying out the foundation. So they're really in the preliminary stages. But I think the approach, and one of my more favorite things is the trauma focused lens. I mean, that's, even having the background that I have and all my interactions with law enforcement and things like that, I still firmly believe that I know some officers, it's a small minority, but they approach problems from that point of view and they
mhm,
try to understand a situation before they come in just rendering judgment. But there are the other guys over there who tend to be in the more majority that's a little bit harder for them. And this could be good a good field of practice for them. I mean,
yeah,
that's where I took it. But Providence Park looks like a very promising project. It's going to stand on its own merits here as opposed to the Austin one because people are going to always look at it more locally
mhm,
than kind of in the grand context. But
mhm.
I did not do a lot of looking into Austin and how Austin operated. But did they put a date down for breaking ground when they were hoping to actually get started
Well,
on
they already
construction?
have, and I'm curious because the Google Maps that you looked at, they actually have already cleared land. They have built. Excuse me. When we were out there, gosh, about 4 weeks ago, they had already had the building up. That's going to be the community center. Um, they had cleared. I mean, they told us, showed us where everything was. She told me when I met with her last week that they have poured the first 10 tiny home concrete pads down. So, um,
It's probably those
yeah,
Google Map views. Sometimes they're like 6 months out of date, and
yeah,
I'd have to like be actually in the app itself and not just kind
yeah.
of peering view it.
I know they're not as far along as I think they had wanted to be originally. I think they'd wanted to have all 100 homes up by the end of the year. I don't think the first phase of it. I don't think that's going to happen at this point. I think that they probably are going to be further back than that. But I'm not sure when she comes, and she's going to come to class. I think it's November the 6th that she's coming. Um,
That'd be great.
yeah, she's coming that November, that week 12. So she's going to give us an update. I also am going to try to get in to talk. They have a conflict management person that deals with that basically oversees their conflict management area at Austin. And she's reached out to them, and I'm going to try to meet with them over Zoom so I can get an idea more of how they deal with conflict there. I may ask if I can record it so I can show you guys short pieces of that. So
Yeah, might be
yeah,
helpful in generating a similar framework as far as how conflict could be approached. It
yeah,
probably would need somebody, individuals more specialized than, especially than myself, but given a beginning framework wouldn't be that hard.
yeah. No, I agree. What about you, Kat? What did you learn?
Well, first off, having, even though I'm out here in Valonia, I mean, Conway has an unhoused problem itself. It's needed. That's that's my opinion. I think I learned that there's a lot of moving pieces, and there's going to be a lot of conflict because those pieces are never going to be on the same page. they're always going to be moving. And I think when I was looking at the website too, I like the fact that they have on their board, you have different people from different walks of life, and it's not just people who have donated money that are on the board. Like I think I was looking some of them up. One was a doctor, and I think that in itself, with a mixture of different people on the board from backgrounds, it reflects the nature of Providence Park itself, with the different how we like the care teams and everything. Everybody has an opinion working together. Not opinion, but everybody is on a team from their different backgrounds working together to help create a sense of community. And I think that was really interesting that they took time to create a board that reflects the mission of Providence Park. It's going to be interesting seeing how, I think it's going to be more successful, as Tony said. Well, Austin is successful, but I think it's going to have more impact here, because living close to Austin and having now lived in Arkansas for a year, there is a change in, there's cultural values are different, and the influence of the surrounding community is different. Austin is a very, how do I say, Silicon Valley focused, all about the money type approach. Let's throw it over here, even though it's successful, but let's throw it over here and help people out and really, really look good, where I feel Little Rock is really there for the people. I'm not saying that Austin's wasn't put together. Providence Park here is being modeled after Austin, but I just feel that there's more heart in Providence Park. I mean, I need to go and take a look at Austin stuff, but I feel Little Rock, it means there's deeper heart within the community here that's going to ensure its success. I think it'll last longer.
That's interesting from your perspective of having lived kind of in both places, or at least been familiar with Austin as well. Austin is it's the university town, right? I mean, University of Texas at Austin, but they've just grown so much in the last few years. I don't know about the values in terms of the city, but the guy who wrote this book, who was the guy who started Providence Park, I ended up getting it and just listening to it online. It's called Welcome Home. Alan Graham, but he tells story after story after story of people that he met that basically changed his heart towards people who are unhoused or who are facing difficult times. And so it gave me kind of a feel for him, but that doesn't mean that the community writ large is like that.
Yeah, that's the big thing.
I was just thinking about that. I know that I've tried bringing in a law enforcement lens and trying to get them incorporated, but last Zoom meeting, you had said something about identifying the areas and locations where the homeless tend to congregate. Law enforcement, especially in Little Rock, they will have information as far as where their typical areas of congregation are. And they could, if you could get them into the fold, you don't have to take officers with you, but they could definitely be good sources of intelligence, is what the military, how I would look at it, as far as identifying habitual, normal locations, and maybe even pointing out some good candidates, people that they think, they've never had problems with and encounters with that turned out negatively, but could be maybe a potential factor in determination for who these the beginning individuals are going to be, because they're going to be some of the most critical.
Some of the most crucial in getting those first ones in.
Yeah, to get the first ones in, to get the
and I know that they've been working with because it's kind of in a rural area. They've been working with the sheriff in that area, but I don't know how deeply involved in law enforcement they are in the Central Arkansas area in terms of identifying people. So that's an interesting idea. So, be thinking about questions that you might have as you are and continuing to be thinking about this. I wasn't planning on doing this, but I want you to kind of see where we're headed in terms of this project and why Providence Park is. I know we did this at the very beginning of the semester, kind of looked at the long view, but in terms of this class. But so at this point, we are on week 6, right? And so we'll go through the things that are due this coming week. I want everybody to know next week I'm going to actually be out of town, so we won't have Zoom class next Thursday night. But I did pick out a interview with William Ury done with Simon Sinek that I want you to watch, and then kind of created a fun little conflict remix video with some AI help that's going to tie into this case study remix that we're going to be talking about. So as we kind of look ahead here, the next thing you'll be doing in terms of Providence Park is going to be planning an interview and reading a little bit more about homelessness and the unhoused. And some of you already know a lot about that from your past research in other classes and things, but these pieces are listed here in the syllabus, but they're also found in Blackboard under the course supplementary resources. So you can go there as well. And if you go up to the interview description up here, in terms of the assignments, it says, and I want you to be thinking about who it is that you might interview. And the reason why I'm bringing this up now, Tony, is because you might interview a law enforcement person, right?
Yeah,
Okay, if that's
probably
somebody that you know
somebody.
you'd be interested in. Okay, so we'll talk in a couple of weeks, not next week, but the following week after that, about what kind of interview questions you might ask. But you might be thinking about who is it that you might be interviewing. So I put here just some examples: a nonprofit leader that maybe helps with unhoused or poverty, or work with addictions, or whatever, somebody that kind of fits within that. Maybe a city official, an advocate for the unhoused or homeless. Maybe I don't think you'll probably be able to get a resident of another tiny home village unless you have contacts somewhere else, like in Austin. But you're going to conduct that interview, not very long, and we'll again come up with questions in a couple of weeks for that. And then you're going to, without the use of AI, generate a 1 to 2 page single space summary of what you found would be conflict issues and dynamics from their perspective in working with unhoused populations, using a trauma-informed communication perspective. And then you're going to compare that to what AI actually gives you. So we'll talk more about the description of that, but I wanted you to see that that's not due until October 19th. Okay. And so just so you might want to be thinking about who would I interview at this point. You don't need to do the interview yet because we haven't talked about what the interview would look like, but we'll talk about that the week that not next week, but the following week. So, but you could just go ahead and be identifying who it was that you think you might be wanting to interview. And then we'll actually be moving into some groups, and this is going to be, I'm guessing, I haven't decided for sure, but I think it might be easier to just have 2 to 3 people per group, so smaller groups, so that you could be able to meet with each other potentially outside of class. And I likely will take the people that are in class and have you guys kind of connect with the people that are outside of class, because you oftentimes get more information, and maybe you kind of give them more information about exactly what it is that we're doing. But you're going to be forming a group, because by the end of the semester, the rest of the semester is basically you're going to be working on a training module outline that could be used to train some part of Providence Park, the stakeholders, in terms of working on conflict in that situation. I assume that I'm going to hopefully have the interview the week of, I think I told them I could have the week of October 20th is when I'm going to try to get, or the week of the 13th, I don't remember, when I'm going to try to get with their conflict specialist from the Austin Community First Village. So I'll have a better idea of the kinds of conflicts that they deal with, and I'll be able to bring that in to you before, as we're getting ready to do the group formations. And so you'll have a draft training outline that you'll do. You'll work on your projects. You'll have references due, and you'll have a resource guide due, and then your facilitator guide. So after Thanksgiving. And so That's where we're headed. And the reason why I'm having you spend quite a bit of time understanding Providence Park is because I need for you to kind of get foundation here, because this is your client. So if you can think about them, they are going to be your client in creating some kind of training that could be used by them. And in talking to Mandy last week, she actually would be interested in the training, if any of you were interested, after the class is over, and actually putting on the training to put as a on your portfolio or resume. She would be interested in having that training actually done, but I'm not requiring, because I didn't know how far along they would be in their work. I'm not requiring you to do the training as part of class. You're just creating the materials for the training. So I wanted you to know a little bit more about that, just to remind you of kind of that's where we're headed. This is your client that we're going to start working towards. So kind of big picture questions in terms of that.
Not particularly. I mean, I'd have to want to, before I'd even consider wanting to do a training, I'd have to actually sit down and want to and do it and go through it just to see if I'd be the best person for it. But I'd consider it depending on what we came up with in the end. I've done similar kinds of trainings before. Not exact, but similar.
Yeah. Kat, any questions on your end?
No questions on mine. I'm just while we're talking, I'm kind of looking what's available here in Conway. You already got me thinking about the interview, so
Yeah, and really it does not have to be anybody connected to Providence Park. It really needs to be somebody connected to the larger issue of helping people. Okay? Larger issue of helping people, probably helping people that are in between housing, dealing with housing issues, or dealing with issues that might be commonly associated with sometimes with unhoused, like addictions, okay, or traumatic experiences that might have landed them into hard times, okay. But there's a variety of kinds of things you can do. So
I have to see. I think I know. No, it'd be Holly Humphreys. I can't remember if she's got married now or not, but I know her mom really well, Donna, Dr. Humphreys, and Holly, I think, was over there at, I think maybe it was UAMS over. She's a psychiatrist over there, and I know she would have touched around these areas, or could at least recommend somebody that
yeah.
I could try to speak with. I'd have to see though, because she might have moved on. I don't know.
And
It's been a while since
it doesn't have to be, when I think about an expert, it doesn't have to be an expert. It could be anybody that's had, I mean, it could be a local community shelter. It could be a local church that offers food pantry. Anyone that might just have experience. It could be a social worker that actually has taught students who have gone into communities like this. So I just want you to get a better kind of feel. The goal of that assignment is for you to get a better feel of what it is, what might be the areas of conflict that might be, needed for training, or what are the conflict issues when you're working with an unhoused population? What kinds of trauma might they be dealing with? And so that's what I'm wanting you to be thinking about. So.
Okay. Something to chew on for sure.
Okay, so let's go ahead and go into this week's work. And the first time you teach a class, you honestly don't know if an assignment's going to work. I wasn't sure the stakeholder map was going to work, but actually in looking at the outcomes that you guys provided, I felt like it did. I'm trying another assignment that is going to be due October 5th. So it'll be due it'll be due at the end of next week, and we won't have time to talk about it next Thursday because I won't be having class officially. So I want to go over it in detail tonight. So it's called a case study remix. My reason for originally putting this assignment in was, and I don't remember if it was you, Tony, or if it was Jeff. There was somebody on one of the first evenings that we were together that talked about culture and how a person's background impacts the way that they might actually deal with conflict. And I remember thinking at the time, beautiful, because I want you all to be thinking about that. And my reason for that is because if you think about this client that we're going to be having, there are lots of things from their background that could be impacting the way that they're going to be dealing with conflict. Even the staff and their background, even the people that are going to end up being the missionals on site, who are going to be like the equivalent of the RAs, resident assistants, in a dorm kind of setting. Their backgrounds are going to make a difference. I was sitting with a couple of students today. One of them had worked in my office as a work study student, and the other one is a graduate assistant in our department. And I just, as I was looking at them and thinking about their own backgrounds and their own places that they've come from, and listening to them talk about kind of some things that were happening, I keep thinking about, what is it that makes us be who we are? And there's a term that the research calls, and it's not a term that I use in everyday life, but I'm putting it into the chat. Okay. It's called intersectionality. Have you guys heard of that term before?
I've heard the term, but I can't recall exactly where I've heard that term, but I have heard that term before. It might have been in a psych class years ago. I think it's like the cross connection between, I think for people, as far as where you come, what your background is, what your thoughts and areas are, as they connect also to your environment, especially for those outside of their environment. But I could be off base. That
I know
could
you're
be
really
another
close, actually. The key term there is intersection.
thing. Mm-hmm.
So if you think about an intersection, so I think about sometimes intersections in different places where roads are coming together. Who we are as individuals is an intersection of our identities, whatever identities are important to us. If gender is important to you, if your age is important to you, if your culture is important to you, if political affiliation is important to you, if your religious background is important, if education is important, if your socioeconomic status is important. And I have no idea with our client, what are the things that are potentially intersecting that make them who they are. It certainly is their experiences in the past, right? It certainly is the trauma that they might have experienced, but there are all kinds of things. I'm listening right now. I like listening to historical fiction. And this was a book that somebody had recommended. It's gotten criticism, so I'm not recommending it, but it's called American Dirt by Janine Cummins. Has anybody read that or listened to it? It's really shedding light on some people who are migrants, who are trying to get from Honduras and other countries, Mexico, into the United States, but they're coming illegally, right? So it's really kind of showing the immigrant crisis, but from making it humanity. And as I'm listening to it, I'm like, all of them have their stories, but those stories are intermixed with how they were raised. The stories are intermixed with their gender. The stories are intermixed with their age, with their religious background. So the same way, the people that you're going to be developing training modules for are going to also have a mix of different kinds of things that are happening in their lives. So this assignment is to help you kind of get in touch with the power of those things to shape how we potentially deal with conflict. I don't think any of those variables, demographic kinds of things, actually force us to be doing what we normally do in conflict settings, but I do think that they impact our choices or our beliefs about what we can and cannot do. And so I've got I'm being blinded by the sun, although I will have some, close that up a little bit more. So here's the assignment. I'm actually just showing it from the note-taking handout, which I'm going to put into the chat to make it easier for you all to get to it. But for the rest of the people, you can find it under weekly materials. And you too can open it up if you want, but I'm going to share my screen so that the people online can also see it. All right. And as I was thinking about this, I actually decided to be more specific as to what I wanted you to do with it. So I'm pretty prescriptive here. And I'm going to do the same thing with the interview assignment too, which is why I don't want you yet to actually do the interview assignment. I want you to be thinking about who you might interview, okay? So I provide the purpose here. It's to basically help you see how context shapes culture. To do this, you're going to describe a conflict situation you have faced or observed. It could be past, present, future, or not future, but one that or you think you might be going into. And I really would like for you to, it could be one that you've already talked about. I would probably, if I was doing this, to be honest, I would probably talk about an interpersonal, professional conflict situation that I have faced at work. And I think it would be fascinating to do this assignment for that situation, because I think the way that that person and the way that I interact would have been very different had we had different, if I was a man, for example, and they were a woman. Just changing that variable alone, okay? So you're going to pick a conflict scenario initially, and then you're going to have AI help you create alternate versions of the scenario, and then you're going to analyze it using course concepts. So you can use ChatGPT. You have a limit. If you have a free version of ChatGPT, you have a limited amount of time that you can actually communicate with it within a certain amount of time. So you might want to use Gemini or Notebook LM, which is a Google product if you want, unless you've got a version that's a paid version of ChatGPT or a version of AI of your choice, okay? So this is what you actually are going to type in. Exactly what I've said here. You do not need to change this prompt. And you're going to say, I'm going to give you a conflict scenario that I've observed or are currently facing. I'd like you to modify demographic variables in the scenario, such as gender, status, age, culture, political affiliation, religious background, education, and socioeconomic status, to create 3 alternate versions of the scenario. Before you do that, I will provide you with the original conflict scenario that I faced or observed. Then I want you to ask me 3 questions about the original scenario, one at a time, before creating the 3 alternate versions of the scenario. Okay, so at this point, you're just giving the instructions all in one paragraph so it knows. It'll say something like, okay, that sounds like fun. I'm waiting for you to give me the scenario. All right, then you will put your scenario with enough details for the AI tool to know what happened. Now, it will help the AI tool if you tell a little bit about the demographics of the people involved, even though you may not realize that those, or even think about that might have impacted. So if I was doing it, I would say, I am a however old, 60-something boss in a academic department. I am having a conflict with a colleague who is a white male, and I am needing to, I would tell a little bit more. I can't tell much more details about the situation, or some of my students are going to know who this person is, okay? They could do the same thing for me, all right? So put your conflict scenario with enough details to know what happened, and you might give a little bit of demographic information about it. What your role was, what their role were, what their race is, what their gender is. So it's going to know a little bit about the demographics that it needs to change, okay? So then you'll do that, and hopefully it'll say, okay, thank you. I appreciate that you gave me that. Now, if it remembers what you asked it to do, I'm going to ask you 3 questions one at a time, okay? If you doesn't, then you can remind the tool that before it provides any alternate scenarios, you want it to ask you 3 questions about the scenario one at a time before creating the alternate versions of the scenario. So remind it of that. Then it will ask you the question. It will ask questions potentially about more demographics. It may ask questions more about the conflict situation. I don't know what it will ask, whatever it wants to know. And you answer those questions in as much detail as you want. Okay? That's where you answer the questions. Then it should give you the 3 alternate scenarios, but if it doesn't, you can say, I'm ready now for my 3 alternate scenarios. So read the scenarios to make sure the AI tool followed the instructions, ask it to revise them if needed, and then you've got that first part done. Okay? So then, without the use of AI, you're going to pick, and I do not care what textbook you use from this semester. I do not care if it's recent or if it's from the very beginning. I want you to take one of your readings, so one of your chapters. Don't care if it's the URI text or if it's the interpersonal conflict text. Pick something, it could be the TRIP model, for example. Okay? Apply those theoretical concepts from one of your readings to each version. And you're not writing this out, but I want you to kind of summarize in a 5 to 10 minute recorded presentation. What were the shifts in communication dynamics and choices as the variables are changed? How did the TRIP model change based on the changes that were made? So I'm wanting you to think about how the context changes the decision making and the dynamics. I did think about that AI is probably going to stereotype people. So you also should reflect on how AI may have stereotyped people in its attempt to create the alternate scenarios. You might even be mad at how it actually assumed that people like that are going to act. So you can also reflect on that. And then if you use any sources like your textbook, make sure you orally cite them. In the assignment, then when you submit it in Blackboard, you're going to submit your work along with the recording and the original and remixed conflict scenarios. Okay? So this is what it looks like when you go into the assignments. It says case study remix. I basically typed the very same thing into the instructions as is there. And I decided after I was doing the stakeholder map, and I apologize that I didn't have this done in advance. That's why I decided to do this for this one, because I'm like, that wasn't really fair for them to not know what I was grading them on. And so I'm like, it would have helped if I had a grading rubric. So I'm like, from here on out, the grading rubric is going to be going with the assignment. So it's just, that's the first time. Anyway, so the items graded with a rubric. So if you want to take a look at the rubric, you can actually go in case you lost where I was. You've gone into the instructions, this item's graded with a rubric. You can see what it is, how I'm grading it in terms of the
That works.
elements. Okay. And then how many points each thing is worth. So 25 points, same amount as the case study paper.
Is the
So again,
recorded
the goal is to help you understand how context might shape conflict and the choices that we make. All right, I think, Kat, you look like you were asking a question.
Yes. Is the recording audio or is it video for the recorded presentation on this?
Yeah, I think I was thinking it would be video at this point, so I can kind of see you. I get tired of grading papers, which is part of the reason why I like to
understand that.
see your face and have you talk. You know, and if I was organizing this, I would have a, you know, just like you would organize a presentation, right? I would have an introduction and a conclusion. And the introduction ought to be kind of get your attention at the beginning, have an overview of what your main points are. And then the conclusion, review your main points, and then kind of tie it all together. And then you should probably have, I would say, anywhere from 2 to 5 main points. So it could be that one of your, I'm not saying what you have to do for main points, but if I was doing this, I would probably organize this with, here's how the scenarios changed. this is how AI changed the scenarios. It changed them this way, this way, this way, this way. Then I would probably have a second main point that would say something about, I'm going to now apply this particular concept or principle. Maybe it's the zooming in and zooming out principle, okay? I'm going to apply this principle to all three of these scenarios based on what it's done, and just be able to kind of show how I would apply it differently. And you could kind of summarize how you apply it differently. And then the third one might be a reflection on, you know what? AI stinks. It stereotypes. And actually, it didn't do a good job with intersection of identities. It just latched onto this one identity and made that person look this way. Whereas I know that their other identities could have actually impacted their choices in that situation. So if I was doing this, I would organize it probably with those three main points, with an introduction and conclusion, but I stopped short of providing that for you so that you could have a little bit of creativity in this.
Okay, that makes sense. I'm one of those people when I see the thing recorded, because the word recorded means so many different platforms. I just wanted to clarify with you
Yes,
at first what recording.
I gave you
You
all
mean.
more information. I would just do it on Zoom if I were you. Yeah.
Okay.
So
That seems more or less straightforward. So you do want us to just share each of the three scenarios and then how they changed and what we would apply to them.
I
to
would spend some
make
time talking about that in
Yeah.
probably as the first main point. I think it's
Okay.
helpful at least to have reflected on that. Okay.
Yeah,
Then
I
you're
was
going
more
to
for an
apply the
executive.
concepts to that. Now I could see, let's just take zooming in and zooming out. Let's say that those are the two concepts you're going to use. And I'm not giving you a certain number of concepts that you use, but you could hypothetically zoom in and then talk about the three scenarios. That could be a first main point. Zoom out, second main point, second concept, and then talk about the three scenarios and how they differ on the zooming out part. Okay. You could do that if you wanted to. If you use
Yeah,
the
that I
trip
think that helps
model,
a little
if
bit.
you use the trip model, then you could have first main point is, you could actually have 5 main points, right? TRIP, right? So you could have T, 3 scenarios, R, 3 scenarios, I, 3 scenarios, P, 3 scenarios, okay? Or you could still have it the way I said it originally, which is, here are the 3 scenarios. Now we're going to apply the trip model to those 3 scenarios, and under the subpoints under T, if I was outlining this, would be scenario 1, 2, and 3. Subpoint under R would be 1, 2, and 3. But again, I'm not as concerned about as which one of those organizing patterns you use as that you do have it organized.
Okay.
That it's not just, oh yeah, well, I did this assignment and yeah, I kind of did some weird things. I don't know. AI is just, it really stereotyped the people. And one of the scenarios was like this, and that reminded me of the trip model here. But I really was bothered by the stereotyping. You see how I'm going all over the place? I'm really not wanting you to do that. So I would start with an introduction that kind of just, here's the conflict. I might even in the introductions just say, here's the original conflict situation.
Take a presentation kind of format.
I really would like for it to be practicing kind of doing in undergraduate, when we teach these presentations skills, we call it macro structure. And all that basically means is that you have a clear introduction, clear body with transitions, and a clear conclusion. People differ as to what should be in the introduction and what should be in the conclusion, but mostly you get started with, this is, I would probably start out with, here's the conflict situation, and I would tell a brief story that I faced. So
should be fun.
here are the 3 points that I'm going to cover. Now let's get into the 3 points. Then at the end, I've covered 3 points. And then, so what my big takeaway is what you would be ending with from doing this assignment.
Oh. That sounds like fun. That sounds like fun.
Okay. I hope it's useful. This is the kind of thing when you teach a class the first time, you really don't know what you're going to get till you get it.
Well, the AI gives a lot of interesting things like that, though. And I mean, if you kind of, with work I've been doing with the AI, you might need to want to be a little forward thinking and understanding what kind of simulation it's going to dish out for you. Try not to pick something that obviously has these, big stereo that makes super big differences where the AI will stereotype down and nutshell that individual down. If you, I mean, I'll have to tinker with it to find the exact way as far as not change the prompt, but change, give good conflict for it to give me something so it's a lot more full and not very shallow. Because I'll try to aim for something that's not super shallow or superficial.
Yeah.
But it's doable. It just takes it's as much. The prompt is great, so I think it can be a lot of fun.
All right, Kat, you have any questions at this point?
No, but I think this will help like getting used to using AI and presenting it on video. So if I ever in the future again have all these AI interviews where I have to use recordings, I will be I will have that skill to be able to see myself and answer questions better. So this is good practice.
Okay, well, good. So you see some application of this beyond this class, which is great, just in terms of presentations. All right, so the other thing that's due well, that's not due this week. That's actually not due until October 5th. Okay, so you've got a couple week, like week and a half to get that done, work on that. This coming weekend, and some people have already turned them in. I don't remember if it was any of you, I just saw them coming in. Your second work-based plan entry is due. You remember every other week, we're going back to one of the 5 scenarios that you provided at near the beginning of the semester that you wanted to be working on related to a work situation or potential future work situation in your 2 cases, okay? So let me just go into this and show you where this is, because there's 2 different parts to this that you have to do. One is the actual second entry, and the second part is the discussion post. So just to remind you, so this is under assignments, work-based conflict interest. And so we're in entry 2. You can see when it's due, entry number 2 in the work-based plan. And so if you view instructions here, select another of the 5 work-based conflict intervention plan tasks that you identified in week 2 and answer the following questions. You should not use AI to help you with this. So these are the very same questions as you had before. So it should, if you kind of jog your memory, a couple of weeks ago you did this. What part of the task creates intrapersonal, it's within yourself, interpersonal or group conflict? So you can talk about that. What concepts have you read about in the last 2 weeks? And I really want you to think about when we're thinking about the last 2 weeks. So this is where I'm trying to find the last 2 weeks, what they would actually be. So this would be weeks 5 and 6, okay, in terms of the last 2 weeks, okay? I think you did week 3 and 4 previously, so this will be week 5 and 6. So which concepts from week 5 and 6 have you read about that can help you deal with the conflict situation? How do you think they might help? Make sure you cite your sources. Then what's one thing you'd like to implement in the future based on the concepts, and then point to an actual situation you think you might could use. And then this is where you fill in the blanks and make this SMART goal. Next time I blank, I will improve my ability to blank by doing this so that blank, and I will know I've succeeded when. Okay, so that is the same assignment. It's just you have a different task and different concepts that you're choosing from. So when you do that, you also will go to the discussion, weekly discussion post, and you're going to go to discussion week 6, and you're going to share your shareable Google Doc of your second work-based plan entry there. And you're going to identify in 2 to 3 sentences what feedback you'd like from your classmates. And I'm saying this more or less to you all who are here tonight and more to the people online. I hope you have gone back and read the feedback that your classmates gave you, because the feedback from, not this week, it was good this week too, but the feedback from last week was the previous time we did this was actually, so it'd be from week 4, was actually so good related to your work-based plan ideas. And you need to listen to your classmates, right? So it's very important that you go back and read those comments. You can respond back to them if you want to, your classmates, but you're not required to respond back. But you should have, you know, a written reflection to at least 3 of your classmates with at least 150 thoughtful words per reply. I'm not counting the words, but that's for you to be thinking about. Try to tie it back to something that we have referenced in the past couple of weeks, if you can. So as always, with all of the discussion posts, your original post is due on Sunday, and that's the same time that the work plan entry is due. So you just basically are taking the link to that, putting it in here, writing 2 to 3 sentences about what feedback you'd like from your classmates. And if possible, don't just say, how can I make my writing more clear? Try to actually say, I am stuck here, or I don't know if I have any idea of how to deal with this, and I need ideas additionally than what I have. Those are the kind of feedback that you want to be asking for, probably from your classmates. It's more about actionable items, okay? And then by Wednesday, 11:59 p.m., you provide your feedback. So it looks like Caitlin's already put hers in, and Michael. So, all right. So that is the other thing that's due for YouTube. For everybody else that's not here tonight, you have to watch the video and also do a journal entry. And the journal entry for this week under the journals, the weekly journal post, is for week 6. And you're basically telling what insights you've gotten from the readings, but it gives specific prompts for you to pay attention to. But you have to watch the video to do that.
And next week, you want us to do a journal entry since we won't have class?
I would like for you to do a journal entry. I've not yet created that journal entry because I do those on Saturday mornings usually.
No problem.
Next week, also, just so you know, the readings are a little bit different. It's the first time that you're actually not going to be required to read out of the interpersonal conflict book, which might be a relief for some people. You have one reading out of the possible book, and it's on being creative, which I thought was actually appropriate in light of the remix assignment, because the remix is actually trying to be creative and make you think outside the box, okay? Although it's not exactly the same kind of creativeness. But in the weekly materials, there are a couple of other readings that I also have assigned for that week. So I've gone ahead and opened up week 6 for you, or week 7 for you, I guess it is. And I haven't, I'm going to try to create this weekend on Saturday, I'm going to try to create like a note-taking handout that you can actually use to take notes on these readings, okay? So it'll show you what I'm seeing as the most important parts of those readings, what I would normally do in class, okay? So I'm going to try to also have under week 7 that note-taking handout, but it won't be for class, it'll be for your readings. Okay, so the first reading is talking about cultural differences in dealing with conflict. And I thought it would actually kind of think it's interesting because one of them is military group conflicts that it talks about too. But it talks about religious groups and other kinds of groups in terms of how they deal with conflict resolution. And I think it would be interesting for you to just think about this. This is written from some person that's from France. And so, you know, how did a cross-culture conflict resolution actually happen as you're thinking about the remix changing things within cultures potentially? See what this might bring in for you as well as you're thinking about that. And then the other article, and these might be the articles that you actually reference if you want to in that remix, because you can pick anything from the readings to talk about when you're thinking about relating it to that. This article is specifically related to individualism and collectivism, which is a big a dimension that people measure in intercultural communication. And so collectivist cultures think of the group first, individualist cultures think of the individual first. And so it's looking at the different kind of concerns that people bring to the table when they're dealing with conflict if they're coming from those two different perspectives. So again, it may be useful when you get to the place where you're actually applying this to the to this actual 5 to 10 minute presentation. You could take something, one of those articles, and use that actually. Oh, this reminded me of when they were talking about this and instrumental versus other kind of concerns that people have, and I'm fine with that. So you can use something far back in one of your readings, or you can use something that's even more recent when you're creating that's due on October 5th, because I will have expected you to have read. So if you just take a look at looking ahead to week 7, I will expect you to have read these by the end of next week, along with the possible chapter 7. You could, these two things, this conflict remix, I actually just put the assignment initially into, before I made it more detailed, into Notebook LM. And I said, create a video that kind of makes this more fun to understand. It did not a bad job. It's like a 5-minute video, so you might kind of find that interesting. This is about a 30-minute video with Simon Sinek, I think. Yeah, 40 minutes, so lessons. And I love Simon Sinek, the way that he approaches things in terms of optimism. So that's what you'll be watching instead of the video, but I will try to post a reading guide after I look at the articles more in depth by the end of the weekend for next week's readings. So, all right, we always spend the first half of the class talking about kind of what we're doing, and the second half of the class is talking about what it is that we looked at and read about. So before we move to that second part, are there any questions?
On the case study remix, socioeconomic status could prompt the AI to alter the job location. Like, say you pick a workplace location, and maybe the conflict would
Geographic
alter.
location. I love that. You can use whatever, and that would be where you could change the prompt, right?
Okay,
You
that's
can
what.
use
Yeah.
other demographic variables. So when I said use the prompt exactly like it is, you can use other demographic variables. In fact, just so that I let me just make a note out to the side, and I'll show you how I'm doing this here in the assignment here. So I'm going to say here, pick demographic variables of your choice, at least 5. Okay. So then you could adapt them. Okay. And the reason why I'm picking more than just 1 or 2 is that I hope will get it to think of the intersection of identities, not stereotyping everything into one of those. Okay.
It might help to tell it that you're looking for intersectionality. It just depends on what definition of intersectionality you want it to utilize. If it's one that it can pull, or if it's
Yeah.
'cause
And
usually
so
this
if you want to do that, I mean, I know, Tony, you like to kind of play along with this. So
I
you
love to play with
could
the AI.
have
We're
it,
having fun.
if you wanted to, you could have it create the 3 things. And then you could say, I'm noticing this
Which is
actually
exactly
seems like
what I
you're
love.
stereotyping here.
It'd probably be a
I would like for
conversation I
you to
have with it in the
use
beginning.
this concept, and then you'll have to give it a definition of the concept so it knows what it is, and quit that and think about the intersection of identities. Now, I will tell you, Tony, it will be so complex to kind of unpack that when you're doing your analysis. It might be that you end up going back to the original alternative.
It probably could. It probably could, but I'll still tinker just to see what I can come up with. I mean, I've been enjoying my time. I went ahead and paid for ChatGPT just so I could have just a $20 a month version so that I could kind of have tinker time.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
I'm
this, I
tinkering a
mean,
lot.
you could go down a rabbit hole and really spend a lot of time. So it's just up to whether
Yeah.
you have the kind of time to do that, but
Yeah.
it's not required. Again, I'm providing some things that are prescriptive here
Oh,
and then some creative license
oh,
around
you've
other
helped
things.
so much. I had not used AI, the tool, at all. I was really kind of resistant to it, but putting it in the class and having this class, I'm adapted it. I've learned how to use it as a tool, make sure to set up parameters for no content generated, things like that when I'm asking to help me like Grammarly style or something like that, so I don't have to pay for an additional service.
Yeah,
But as long as you're really conscientious about your approach, you don't want to, you give it the syllabus and you say, we're creating parameters based on the syllabus. You cannot go outside of this syllabus. You will not generate content. I've turned it more into the mirror, persona mirror project that you had recommended.
yeah,
I actually have that as a running ongoing project for things sometimes when I log off, I'll bat ideas around with it. I think today before I got on, I was talking about, I heard the Palestinian call. I asked it to just kind of give me what was going on. And then we just like devoided into like a 60-page chat history, just kind of talking about different areas like in Malaya where a counterinsurgency was actually possible and actually worked and the British government did it, but then why it failed in multiple other locations. And then just really expanded on it. It's really a useful tool for someone like me. I'm an expansionist. I love to expand anywhere I can.
yeah, yeah. And
So,
so I'm glad that you're doing that, as long as you realize that sometimes it might hallucinate and it loves to please.
yes.
So
Yes.
if you brag on it, it
Yeah.
continues giving you the same things. But if you critique it and you say, no, no,
Mhm.
no, 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 it also
Mhm.
then will start moving. Now, I was telling my students in the other class that I teach, my other night class, that I've created folders. So I'll have a folder for department chair. I'll have a
Mhm.
folder for my Braver Angels work. I have a folder. So my Braver Angels work, I was in a meeting on last week, and they were trying to figure out a way to have a discussion between two legislators on the state legislators, one on opposite sides of the political aisle, in a way that would people we could actually get people to do this, right? As opposed to
Mhm.
feeling like it was going to like ruin their chance for reelection. And so as they were talking about it, I knew what they wanted, and I'm like putting it into ChatGPT. And I'm like, okay, this is what, and I put it into my Braver Angels folder, because everything in that folder, it compares against everything else in that folder. So I've already told it what the purpose of Braver Angels is. I've told it what the Braver Angels way is. I've told it what it is that we do. It
Yeah.
helped me actually identify some work for a workshop I was going to be doing. Everything in that folder is Braver Angels. So it feels like a Braver Angels expert that it's giving me. So when I came back and I'm like, well, what if we did this? And I showed them that what I was doing, and they're like, you just gave us 15 pages worth of stuff that would have taken us 2 weeks
Yeah.
to have
It,
generated. And I'm like, and some of it I didn't like. And as they were
yeah.
talking, they're like, I don't like this idea. So I'm right there on the spot saying, this is what I need for you to change right now. Change
Mhm.
that. And then I'm like, okay, what about this?
Yeah,
And
it's really, really good. If you can, it takes a little because when I first opened it up, I was really heavy on it that it is a mirror for me. It is not to generate content. It is not to replace my voice. It is to assist me in the development of ideas. Now I'm going to eventually create a parameter where those come off, and we can call it the Kraken parameter, but so that it can come in and be in a heavy content generation form. But I go through everything that we work on. I was doing some class prep on a case study and I experimented with it. And I had to kind of scan through the case study, pull out some details that it hadn't pulled out. But I went into every single detail, participants, style, method used. And then I made sure to back and forth with it if I didn't understand something, a willingness to contribute as opposed to, I think it gave me a different word, but it wasn't a willingness to contribute. It was willingness to like participate or something, which is actually a key delineation in that case study. And I was able to then go into class and give kind of my summary of it, and Kat was there, and it worked just fine as far as that. But I spent 3 hours working with the AI, breaking it down. I have like hundreds of pages of chat history saved, so I can go back and upload a chat history.
And that's the difference, Tony, between what you're doing and what a student who is just wanting to get this done as quickly as possible. Here's the assignment. I want you to do it and spit it out. They don't think about what the outcome, what the output is, and they just submit it. That
Yeah.
is not the appropriate use of.
And that's, I mean, I imagine, I can foresee a time when universities developing an academic AI that it can utilize something that somebody has really done parameters and guard work with, but it'll take a lot of, coding and setting up, but ultimately where it's designed to help the student, but not do things for the student. It's like
Yeah.
you need to do your own critical thinking. Now, if you prompt me and ask the right questions, you'll get where you're headed, but you've got to prompt it. You can't just say, I want you to plot me out a 300-word essay on this topic.
Yeah,
'Cause
Khan
that-
Academy actually has already started doing kind of that work. And if you guys ever used Khan Academy when you were in school at the younger ages, or you know people that have, it's really good with math and science
Mhm.
for people that are trying to learn difficult concepts. And they have built in a tutor that basically
Yeah.
is asking questions. And rather than giving the answers, they will continue guiding you, but it's not giving you, it's telling you basically, here are the kinds of steps. I want you to do the steps though. And then
Yeah.
critique how you did the steps. And so there are people that are doing that. All right. So
Yeah.
this week, the
Rabbit hole.
readings, and I'll be honest, this week's readings are probably my weakest area of the whole semester. And so I am at this point, I was actually hoping that Jeff was here, but you guys actually, because I think he's had this class. Did you guys take the negotiation class this summer?
I have not. I think I've got that set up. I'm gonna take that next
It's
semester, I
offered in the
think.
summer typically, and I
Is
know
it?
that I'm
Okay.
pretty sure that Jeff has taken it, and so he'll be like listening to the video and be like, yeah, like he's gone this week with all of his traveling, but negotiation is something we could spend a whole semester on, and we're still not even hardly touch the surface. Yuri, probably, if you were to ask him, describe yourself to me, I'm a negotiator. He probably actually would say that would be his title. Sorry, I'm getting I gotta shut off my text messages here. Sorry, it's do not disturb, because all of a sudden I'm seeing stuff yeah, okay. Okay, so negotiation, bottom line, is about communication. And it's
Mhm.
about trying to understand the other party's needs and interests and goals, their positions, and trying to understand my needs and interests and goals. Or if there's multiple, a lot of times a negotiator is working with two different parties, and they don't have a dog in the fight. The negotiator themselves doesn't have a dog in the fight. And
That's
so
ideal.
they're trying to come up with a solution for something. And so the two concepts, well, Yuri talks about the second victory, right? So if we're talking about, if we're just kind of going into, we've just done the first one, right? Finished up that with the zoom in, zoom out, with the going to the balcony. Well, this time we are into this section
Opening up the building bridge.
on
Yeah.
page 119 that's
Mhm.
called Build a Golden Bridge. So one of the
Mhm.
readings for this week was just the introduction to this chapter. Now, he talks about the second victory, okay? The first victory is we're overcoming our own impulse to fight, right? So we're going to the balcony. We're trying to figure out and slow things down. So our kind of impulse to actually fight. The second victory is somehow creating the situation so that the other side can say yes to you. It's enabling the other side to say yes in a way that saves space for them, in a way that the solution is attractive to them and it's doable. So he goes into then the second the other reading for this week, which is chapter 6, and talks about the first step to that, which is basically listening. Okay. And I'm going to show a part of a video of him talking about that here in a little bit. So in the second victory, you're not just removing obstacles. You're actually trying to create a path forward for them. And he said that in order to do that, you've got to have looked at the situation from the balcony perspective, taken a perspective that looks at zooming in and zooming out, okay, all the things that you've already done that we've already talked about. But we've got to not push so hard on what it is we want, because if you push too hard, you might win the argument, but you're going to lose the deal, is how he said it. Is you may win the argument, but lose the deal. So you're transforming the negotiation, this building a golden bridge, from a win-lose struggle into a shared win. Win-win. So when he talks about the tools that you use for this, and I'll just pull these up on the screen from the handout from tonight. When he talks about these tools, his golden bridge tools, you listen and get the other people to be involved. You're addressing their unmet needs. You're making sure they can save face, that they're going to actually look good. You can think about, steps. It doesn't have to happen all at once, and sequence those steps. And you can make it easier to say yes than no. So removing barriers, with the bottom line of making it possible for them to join you in a solution. Now, negotiation, when I think about negotiation, I also think about just trying to get the other person to understand you, and you trying to understand the other person too. So I have a question here I want you two to think about here on the screen. Think of a time when you wanted someone to agree with you, but they resisted. Okay, so I'm going to give an example. This is a small example. When my daughter, youngest, decided she wanted to, she was going to school, is still going to school at Oklahoma State at Stillwater. She decided she wanted to move to Oklahoma City, which is a good 45 to 50 minutes, 60 minutes away, get an overnight job at Amazon so that her boyfriend could move in with her. Now, were there any things that I mentioned in that without you knowing anything about my relationship with my youngest daughter that would have been like, I bet Dr. April didn't agree with some of that?
I would have to say
There's probably
100%.
about every single one of those things.
Yeah, I thought the first one was that.
Right. So this is my daughter, who is so bullheaded that it doesn't matter what I say, she's going to do the opposite.
Student of experience.
Okay. So I had no idea how to build a golden bridge. I'll be honest. She also was a young adult. So there are times in which I just said, let her do it and see how she does.
Mhm.
And I kind of just let her go and let it go. And I wasn't really trying to get her, I gave up on getting her to agree with me. Okay. And sometimes that's the approach we take. But there may be other times that you can actually think about building a golden bridge that actually makes it easier for them to say yes. Not that you're giving up your values, but you're actually trying to find a kind of a bigger picture of what do we both value here that we can actually move forward together in this situation. Okay, so I'll give you another example. I think I told you that, and this really was a negotiation. And then I want you all to think about it, a time for yourself potentially. So I think I've mentioned this example before. In my department 2 years ago, we had a big blow up, almost a crisis level in terms of morale, in which half of the faculty believed I was assigning summer teaching unfairly. Have I told you guys this this scenario that I
Yeah, I
shared?
think it was maybe 2 weeks ago, might have been
Yeah.
3.
All right. So I ended up bringing in a mediator because I could not see straight through this. Somebody that could help negotiate. Okay. Although I called her a facilitator. She did a survey, an anonymous survey to find out kind of what the needs were of each of the parties. She identified specific things that were actually underlying the conflict that were not necessarily about summer teaching. They were things like, we really hadn't come back in the office since COVID, so we weren't seeing each other. We actually have offices, some of us on the 6th floor of our building and some of us on the 1st floor of our building. And guess where my office is? It's the 1st floor. So the people I see the most are on the 1st floor. So I actually am building more relationships with those people, and there's a perception that they're getting special privileges. Okay. That may not have anything to do with summer teaching, but there's a perception of that. And so she finally said, I think you all need to come up with some common values that you have, that you can actually come up with, that you can agree on, that could lead you forth to finding a possible solution that would be bigger than what anybody's thinking about. Because right now it was seniority matters. You give the summer teaching to the people who are the most senior in the faculty that have been here the longest, regardless of their income. The other group was like, nope, that's not equitable. You give it to the people who need it the most, and you come up with an equitable solution where everybody gets a chance to teach. If I give in to one group loses. If I give in to the other group loses. It was a win-lose. So what could we do that's building a golden bridge between the sides? And she started with values. All right.
That's a good place to start.
We ended up coming up with a summer schedule last summer that worked out for everybody. It was like kind of like, oh, I wasn't sure it was going to, but it did. And I've got to try again this coming summer to see if I can still use those values that we came up with to create something that everyone will be happy with. I don't know if I'm going to be able to do it.
Well, I
That's
think
the
you
goal.
got faith in you,
Okay?
Doc. You got this.
I don't know.
You got the
So
model. That's all you need is the model.
maybe. Okay. But we had to build a golden bridge. We'll talk about kind of what we did. When have you had a time when you wanted someone to agree with you, but they resisted? And you could actually use some of the things about building a golden bridge. What would the golden bridge might have looked like if you could go back and do it again? Or maybe you did build a golden bridge, but you didn't know that it looked like that or what it was called.
Well, the time I can think of, and I can't get into just too many specifics because one thing about conflict that, you know, sometimes the other side just has to lose because they are actually a vile, morally bankrupt person, and they just have to lose because if they win, it's actually very negative for the people who are good in this world, who are trying to do right and not be wrong. That. But when it was my mother's divorce was coming off and everything, my older brother had been scarred by everything very heavily, and he's withdrawn himself and gone to Texas, and 10 years back now, he's maybe more than that. And at that time, he had tried at one point to get my mom, to a point where she could and divorce and all of that. And she resisted. And it got to this point where I was able to get her there. I got us removed out of the house. We were able to get an attorney, even though it didn't last because he's a lawyer and he wrote 24-page briefs. Wanted $150,000 from, so that's beside the point. But when I wanted, yeah, that was any lawyer that we went to talk to because of the amount of stuff he wrote. But that's a fact. It's not defamation. But we went into it, and when I tried to bring my brother in, and I said, "I got her. We can come together and do this how we should." He looked at me square in the eye and said, "I don't care," and left it at that right in the middle of my apartment. And I was just flabbergasted, and I flew off the handle. It was like, how can you just not care? And as opposed to doing what I probably would have done now and being out of survival mode and more conscientious about things, I would have gotten to that underlying feeling, and maybe I would have had his support, more of his direct support. Now he was able to come in the end to be the person, the point person on the negotiation when we finally got a judge to order him to get an attorney. We
Mm,
still couldn't get one,
mm,
but
mm.
as long as we weren't talking to him, we were okay. So that bridge moment where he finally came in and he did, and we were able to get everything wrapped up. You know, I was in constant communication, but I felt I had too much emotion in it. So bring in the emotionless third party who's more dejected than myself. And it worked out favorably. But I wish I could have had him on board earlier, because our conflict wasn't so much about this is the right action or this is, no, he's obviously right. My brother had just been so defeated so many times by trying to help my mom get out. And the reverse side, I was just trying to, before, in the early times, either too young or I just was not in a mental headspace to do it.
Mhm.
And I finally got there and we got out of that. But sometimes when you're the bridge, when it's infused with emotion, the third party is great. Go to a neutral location is another part of the balcony if
Mhm.
it's doable and helpful, where people aren't under public eye. That I think would have allowed us to quickly assail over our issues, get to his underlying issues, and me actually bring him in. I mean, he did play roles, but for 2 years, mom and I were on our own. We couldn't get help from anybody, and it's kind of understandable. She comes from a different culture. A stand beside, he's finally going to grow up and he's going to stop doing the childish things and all of that. No, he never did. There are still people now today who are finally starting to realize, they're just like, oh my God, he's almost 60 and he's still doing that. And
Yeah.
that's just unbelievable. And now the truth is out, but those bridge moments, when it can be done, because like I said, this is one of those my personal situation, one of those very few times where if we lost, we wouldn't have our home. He
Yeah.
wanted to be able to come in here any day that he wanted. They're divorced, but he could come in here and do whatever he wanted and
Yeah. No.
subject us to, like, man, she made you become a lawyer. You were a freaking security guard, bricklayer, cop. She's the one who got you to a lawyer. You should be freaking paying her spouse maintenance, but you're pleading poverty, which we all know is crap. But couldn't find the money. So when you have an outside force that is trying to impose harm on you, sometimes you got to go. The Yuri's way is great. Use that way to get your ducks in a row, get your pieces in
Yeah.
order. But have no, he pulled Sun Tzu out, and I actually have read Sun Tzu. I mean, it's a different
Yeah.
book, but you always leave your enemy a way to get out, so
Yeah. Yeah.
that
Oh,
you don't.
that's exactly what we're talking about. So.
Yeah, and we finally got there. My brother did come in and help at the end, and his help was critical because I was too emotionally charged after 2.5 years of dealing.
Would be. Yeah.
Yeah, but
Well, that's a
it's
great
something I
example.
wish I knew sooner.
Yeah, it's a great example, Tony. And I do agree with you that sometimes it's just not possible if we are in it and so emotionally charged, we have to have somebody helping us.
Yes.
So the advantage of a marriage counselor, for example, in that setting too. Kat, can you think of a time where Golden Bridge would have helped, or maybe you did actually build one?
So, my mom, when I was living in Texas back in 2022, I think my mom finally came to visit, but she came down to San Antonio and she was talking to me about a guy that she met online and how he hadn't come to visit her yet. And he worked on an Alaskan oil rig, but he was really old, and how he was asking her to help move money in his account. And I just kept thinking, oh no, she's, um, and and I she was getting really defensive when I brought it up to her. And I even took some of the pictures she showed me and I looked up his information and tried to dox the guy and found out where the name was being used. And the picture he took was from some financial report somewhere. Like, I traced the photo back in Google, and she was getting defensive. No, he's real. No, no, I'm not a child. I mean, my mom was approaching, I think she's almost 74. So I think she's getting, a little bit of dementia probably too. Um, because that same time she used to have a friend in Hollywood that she met in the MIRC chat days. And this, I wish I had the golden bridge to it too, to these people. She knew a person of smaller stature, and he was an actor. So while we were in Dillard, she came up and talked to a person and was like, yeah, I have a friend who's shorter too. And I was like, oh. So a golden bridge in both situations would have worked. It's just they occurred in the same day. I wish I could have extended a golden bridge to the people my mom was talking to and just have said, I don't mean to stereotype, but hey, she's old. Just kind of ignore her. But in regards to like her online dating person, I try to put myself in her shoes and how her husband had died 2 years before and she had been taking care of him the whole time. And so she really was going through something emotionally and trying to define her life all over again. You know, there was no job, she was retired. She was no longer a caregiver. So I was kind of looking at Yuri's golden bridge and I was like, okay, how Yuri talked about listen deeply, hear what the other side really wants. And I think my mom was just trying to share like, hey, I have a life, you know, don't worry about me. I'm trying to live it up and I'm not alone. And so I think I just needed to listen to him and try to understand where she was coming from and put myself in her shoes.
Yeah.
But
And listening alone isn't enough if there needs to be a change in behavior, you know?
yeah,
So,
yeah,
but at least,
There was a lot
yeah,
of vulnerability that
she
she
was,
had.
she initially, was like, oh yeah, this person's fake. And then another person tried it again, but she was smart about that one. She didn't move money in accounts for anybody this time.
oh, that's good. That's really good. So, well, I thought it would be helpful to hear actually Yuri talk about, he has a TED Talk that was done in 2015. And so I'm going to pull it up. It's actually linked in the handout, but I'm going to pull up and just show you a couple of clips. You can watch the whole thing if you want to. It's called The Power of Listening. And so let me just get this pulled up here shortly and then find the clips that I'm wanting as we move forward here. It'll probably do a commercial first. 40. And I'm just going to have him highlight in his words kind of how you go about listening. But chapter 6 is all about this, right? So I would encourage you to, go back and read chapter 6 if you haven't already read it yet. So let me share my screen here. Part of it. Okay.
So how do we listen? Well, it turns out that we often take listening for granted as something easy and natural. But in fact, at least in my experience, real listening, genuine listening, is something that needs to be learned and practiced every day. In ordinary listening, we're hearing the words and we're often thinking, where do I agree? Where do I disagree? What am I going to say in response? In other words, the focus is on us. In genuine listening, however, the spotlight moves to the other person. We put ourselves in their shoes. We tune into their wavelength. We listen from within their frame of reference, not just ours. And that's not easy. In genuine listening, we listen not just for what's being said, but for what's not being said. We listen not just to the words, but to what's behind the words. We listen for the underlying emotions and feelings, the underlying needs, what that person really needs or wants. Let me give you an example. About 1.5 years ago, I was invited to ask a Brazilian entrepreneur by the name of Abilio Diniz to help
Okay, he's already, in one of the other videos I've shown of him, he's already told the story, part of the story. So I'm going to move this forward to another portion of this video.
It. Well, to tell you the truth, it's not so easy. I mean, if I reflect on my own experience for a moment, there are times when I feel like, you know, I'm listening pretty well in my work, only to go home and find out I'm not listening so well to my wife, for example. It's humbling, I can tell you. The real problem in the way, what makes it so hard to listen, is that there's so much going on in our minds, so much noise and distraction, that we don't have the mental and emotional space to be able to truly listen to the other side. So, how do we clear our minds? It may seem odd, but the secret I find is if we want to listen to the other side, we have to learn to listen to ourselves first. When I was sitting there with President Chavez, what really helped me was that just beforehand, I had taken a few moments of quiet just to pay attention to what was going on for me, to listen to myself, to quiet my mind. So when he began shouting, I was ready. I could notice, in fact, that my cheeks were reddening, that my jaw was a little clenched. I felt some fear or some anxiety. And by paying attention to those sensations and emotions, I was able to let them go so that I could then listen truly to President Chavez. So what if before an important or delicate or sensitive conversation, we took a moment of silence just to tune in, listen to where we are? I believe if we did that, if we listened truly to ourselves first, we would find it a lot easier to listen to others.
All right, if you want to see that whole video of him talking about this, and this is a little bit older, you can actually go into week 6 in the weekly information, and I'll just show you where this is so you can know where it is. But go into weekly materials, and his whole TED Talk on listening is here. It's only about 15 minutes long, so if you want to watch the whole thing, you can. But as I think about this in terms of putting the spotlight on the other person, but also listening to yourself, when you all were giving the examples, and Kat and Tony, both of you had to recognize at some level, even though Tony's yours was over a longer period of time, and Kat, you're two different situations with, sounds like with your mom, you were trying to put yourself in their shoes, but you also had to realize what was going on inside of me, as I'm trying to listen. So one of the things that's really, it's really hard to do is to listen at the same time you're listening to the other person to what's going on inside of you. Okay. So do any of you remember a time in which a person had yelled at you? The last time a person yelled at you?
It's kind of hard for me to remember the last time a person yelled at me because going through stuff with my counselor, I've kind of just learned how to listen, but when somebody's yelling, you just don't give them the energy. So I really didn't practice listening. So quite honestly, anytime somebody yells at me, goes in one ear and out the other. So I don't react to it. I just avoid it. But I can say one of the most significant things that gave me a negative attitude for many years is when I was on active duty, we had a executive officer who would just yell at everybody for every time. Anytime he didn't get what he wanted, it was insults, you're stupid, racial jokes. Like, I mean, this guy, whew, I think he yelled at me one time. He was like, "Why didn't you do this? You're a beep, 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 beep. You should just get out. You're terrible." I was like, "Oh." I was that so I remember times where I was yelled at significant like that. Not always sits in my head.
I don't
Yeah.
think we can hardly listen when that is happening.
Yeah.
without completely separating ourselves out from the situation. And I don't mean dissociation in terms of like a psychological dissociation, but actually imagining ourselves on a balcony, watching that person talk and be able to kind of see it from, okay, I wonder what's going on for them and what's happening inside of me where I do not have to respond at that moment. So most of the time, thankfully, unless you're in an abusive relationship or workplace, we're not having to deal with that kind of listening. But we do have to try to figure out where a person's coming from and what their needs are. So I thought I would try a little experiment since we just have the two of you tonight. I wonder if there's either one of you that could share in 1 minute, not a long thing, a recent frustration that you've experienced. So this could be work, school, or everyday life. So a recent frustration, not in great detail, because what I'm going to want is the other person to actually listen without interrupting. And then when the first person finishes, to actually reflect back what they heard to see if they understood them. So do either of you have something you could share within 1 minute that would be a recent frustration?
I've got one. Got one. So
All right, so Kat, you're not interrupting, okay? You are just, and in fact, what I'm gonna do here is I'm gonna spotlight both of you. I'm gonna spotlight, actually, add a spotlight. So I'm gonna have Tony, you actually share, and then all Kat is gonna do is she's gonna reflect back whenever you finish, and I'll kind of, I'll kind of be like, stop, if you're going too long. So, okay. So go ahead and share your frustrating thing.
So, here since I've started back to school, I've stopped working full time, and I'm been a full time worker now, 40, 50 hours a week for the past, uh, 3.5, 4 years, putting a lot of work in, and I've had a good stable source of income, and we were able to keep, everything in balance and the bills, and now I've had to pull back so that I could focus on doing my grad certificate full time. And the workload is extreme. Now I can handle that, but the bills and all of that, some other things, although they're being met, there are some things that I'm in like a net negative where basically I have the money to cover. But if I'm not very careful, if I have a bad incident that occurs where I need to throw out, throw $2,000 or $3,000 at a problem, whatever it may be, medical, got insurance, but I see my resources kind of slowly dwindling, having to space things out. And in my mind, just sometimes, especially when I have to check the bank account, whenever mom needs me to go and buy X, Y, and Z, she has special diet, she has special things that she needs that I almost have to spend, 24, 20, 30, $40 almost every other day. And sometimes, especially with my more responsibility set mindset, staying in the lane of fiscal responsibility and understanding that my mother has Parkinson's and I can't get mad gets problematic because sometimes I do have to say no, and I don't really like to all that often. It causes her stress and makes her feel bad. And she feels like an utter failure when she's worked very hard for the past 30 years of her life. And now she's in this mode where she can't go work. She's still working age. She's 58, you know. She was a very successful division manager for Walmart. And it's frustration, but it's sadness on the inside that in order to do this step that I'm hoping will propel me to where I want to be is difficult because it's causing her strain sometimes. We're fine, but we have to remember that we must, maintain our spending and and she knows as well as someday she comes back with me and helps me understand it. But the frustration of what I was and now what I am, gambling towards a future which high probability of success but could always not work out. So
Okay,
got a
that's
little
good.
frustrated, and
That's
that
good.
was it. It was just a frustrating moment.
Yeah. All right, Kat, so reflect back what you heard Tony saying, and I really want you to be thinking about even what was not said, what was behind the words, but their feelings and his feelings and needs as well.
So I think just to summarize, what I heard is Tony reflecting how he was going from an independent adult working 40, 50 hours a week, taking care of himself, um, to now, going to school, which isn't a problem. The workload's not frustrating, just like his job wasn't frustrating working all those hours. But now he's taken the role sort of as parent, taking care of his mom while still trying to maintain this fiscal responsibility. And it's hard for him because his mom is getting frustrated that, hey, I'm not the child, I'm the parent, but due to her disability right now, technically Tony being the caregiver is sort of like the parent saying, "Hey mom, we can't spend this, we can't spend that." And it just is kind of frustrating to have to tell your mom, who's your parent, "No, you can't do that." So just you it seems like he wants to still be that independent adult. Um and wants to go back to being the son because it's hard being the parent when your parent is still alive and sort of kind of realizes that. Nobody ever wants those roles to switch. And I think that's typically what's felt in caregiving relationships between children.
What do you think,
Yeah.
Tony? Did you get the gist of what you were saying, but also kind of your feelings and needs?
She probably exposed an angle that, although I say I haven't considered, is one that is very true. It's one I kind of put on down there and bury because, yeah, but in my mind, it's rational. It's not like she's my first, but she is my mother, so she has a very important connection to me. And to go from the wise, strong, steadfast woman that she was to the now I have to walk on eggshells and make sure that I don't upset her unnecessarily. So I must always keep my personality in check. You're right. It's more or less like being a parent, and I've got no children. So it is a underlying frustration. Thank you, Kat. That was very good.
Yeah. I actually think you did a good job, so I want to move the spotlights here. So, what happened in that situation that's different than the situation where a person is mad at you and in your face is that you didn't have any you didn't have any dog in the fight here. Okay. And so imagine you're the negotiator and you were then to talk also to Tony's mother and try to build a golden bridge between them related to what her needs are and her concerns and her experiences. You would have to understand both sides before you came up with a golden bridge that might actually be able to work. So one of the things that I love about Yuri's chapter, this chapter that we just finished, is on page 121. It's called the one text process. And I don't know if you guys found that to be useful or not, but I had never heard of it before. This is one that they actually used in, he said, we first learned about it from a Harvard Law School professor who had served on the U.S. negotiating delegation. He says, the one text, as we called it, is an ingeniously simple alternative to the usual haggling over opposed positions. Instead of pressing for concessions, a third party, so this in case would have been in the case of you, Kat, if you actually were doing this between Tony, and I'm not saying, Tony, that you need a negotiator, but I just give you an example. A third party drafts a possible
Totally
agreement
fine.
and asks, so on page 121, bottom of page 121, top of page 122. A third party drafts a possible agreement and asks the parties to give their comments. Then the third party continually revises the text to address the concerns until a consensus is reached. And then the one text is a way to build a golden bridge. So then he goes and tells about an example of actually doing that. And I thought that was kind of an interesting, just key thing that I got out of that chapter. And it reminded me, and I do want to move into the last 15 minutes here of the interpersonal conflict text. So it reminded me and there were so many things in that text. I just pulled out one thing that I want you all to be remembering and focusing, and it's the 7 elements of principled negotiation, okay, from that interpersonal conflict chapter on negotiation. And this, by the way, is where we start getting different chapters, depending on which edition of the book that you have. So this is chapter 9 in the 11th edition and chapter 8 in the 10th edition. So you're going to see some places where we've got that. And they really talk a lot about in the chapter, collaborative problem solving versus competitive bargaining. And it really is getting at the notion of, if we can spend enough time actually understanding the needs, the feelings, the underlying values of the why, basically behind the positions, like we were talking about last week, of all the sides, then we have the potential for building a golden bridge. Okay. So I identified, there's kind of three larger principles that tie these, and they don't talk about this in the interpersonal conflict book. I just put these together, trying to grasp how do these 7 elements of principled negotiation that the interpersonal conflict text talks about. So there's relationship, communication, interest, brainstorming many options, creating objective criteria or legitimacy of decisions, the BATNA alternatives, and commitment. Okay, when they look at this. And really, as I was trying to group these together, I thought they could group together in these 3 kind of principles. If we can understand negotiation as a communication process, not just a set of tactics. So we basically understand that it's not just, I'm making this move, you're making this move. I'm making this move, you're making this move. That we really are dealing with humanity and human beings who are coming at this and have their own relationships, and that we have to think about the communication that's happened prior to the negotiation between the parties, the communication that's happening during the process, and even after the process. He talks about one example of where they thought they had a golden bridge, and then the people walked away and said, no, we're not going to do this, and how they, dealt with that. So even after something you think is negotiated. So that as a communication process. The second kind of principle is recognizing the role of framing and power dynamics, going back to the Rice model of power that the interpersonal conflict book talked about, but also how we actually look at the conflict from a balcony perspective, or just from the perspective of one person or more persons. How can we frame things differently? And so they talk about, reframing from what the person initially comes in with to really why it is they want it. So back to that concept of asking why. Why is it that you want this? Why is it that you want this? Why is it that you think this is important? I had a conversation recently with one of the persons who was involved in this conflict in my department. And and this has been going on for a couple of years, and we've kind of got to the place where I think we're okay. But I finally told the person, you and I are not going to agree on the values here. We're going to have to agree to disagree on what the values are. But he told me recently, you know what really made me angry? You know what really made me set me off? And he told me what it was. And I thought, I didn't do something that really helped here. I actually didn't attend to my communication in all the aspects, didn't recognize how my communication was actually devaluing him. And he made me realize that. And so as I thought about it, I'm like, maybe this is more about the why behind his demands and less about the demand. He didn't feel respected. Like, oh, wow. Okay. Generating a lot of options. That's where I put in the one text process to expand the pie, actually coming up with what the criteria would be of a good solution. And then what's going to happen? What are the acceptable alternatives? If no solution is found, what am I willing to live with as a department chair if they don't agree with me? What are they willing to live with? Okay. And then the third kind of big bucket of principle where this fits is to shift. We have to shift from this competition mode to collaboration mode in order to preserve relationships. And both parties have got to be committed to having some kind of realistic agreements. So those are the kind of the things that I wanted to draw out of the interpersonal communication text. Were there other things that you all, starred or underlined or thought, wow, I hadn't thought about it this way before from that text from the reading for this week?
Well, the one thing that I saw in the IC book, I didn't think about it when I was reading Yuri, was it's the integrated approach. But the point of negotiation is that both parties want to come to a sensible conclusion of some kind. It's actually it's an agreement where, like with my situation, where he's making these outrageous demands that are just like, dude, no. I mean, we can't let you come in and threaten our peace,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
threaten us all the time, just willy nilly, just because you want to. And when you read something, sometimes like a lot of the conflict, I've been through a lot of different conflicts. A lot of the conflicts is reinforcing, but that really sets it in mind that yeah, there are some things and some people they're not interested in negotiating.
yeah.
And it could just be a farce or whatever it is, but be mindful that if they're not willing to actually come to the table and do the work, negotiation isn't the end goal for them.
And it very well may not be, but it may be for some of the other people that are involved in the conflict to get around it, which is what you had told about in your earlier story, that we can actually take that person out of the equation and still we have some disagreements among us that we've got to deal with. Yeah. So yeah, the integrative approach is the way they talk about collaboration. And really, when I think about that integrative approach, it is the golden bridge. So as you're thinking about, as we're kind of moving away a little bit from reading in the interpersonal conflict chapter for at least this next week, think about as you're reading about the golden bridge, how does that relate to what you just read related to the integrative approach? Kat, anything from interpersonal conflict that you want to bring out?
Two things that really stuck in my mind after reading that chapter were that the text mentioned that a lot of the work in negotiation tends to focus on making it making it a competitive process rather than an integrative process. And I thought, okay, there's a point. And then thinking about a lot of those negotiation books or blogs that are out there, the world kind of tends to look at it from a win or lose aspect. And then I kind of looked at what tied into that was sort of the disadvantages of integrative conflict. And I think the reason why people look at it as a win or lose is it says the disadvantage is it's hard work. And if you're not exposed to it, you need specific training. And people tend to get discouraged by that. So they either feel pressure to compromise or make it a win lose situation.
Mm.
And
Yeah,
I
if you
thought
don't
those two things tied in.
Yeah, if you don't have time, if you need to make a quick decision, if it's life or death, we don't have time for integrative. I mean, if somebody's going to lose,
Mhm.
if I've got to put together the summer schedule and I've got people on my back, it's got to be out by a certain time. And it's just let the chips fall. I mean, somebody's got to make the decision. And so there are times in which we just don't have time to do that, or there's parties that aren't willing to play in the sandbox with us, like Tony was talking about. But and so it's kind of like, does communication solve all the problems of the world? No. Does more communication actually make it better always? No. Is the integrative approach always best? No.
No.
Okay. And so recognizing that it's one tool, as I think about this class and I think about what I hope you gain from it overall, the students in the classes, I hope you're adding things to your toolbox. Okay. But all the tools aren't going to work in every situation. And so that's something for you to, consider as we're moving forward. And even though he's going to be telling lots of stories in the Yuri book about, when he was able to draw these golden bridges, I mean, he worked in Israel and Palestine, and look, we're still in a mess. Okay. And it was maybe solved for a moment in time, and now it's still a mess. All right. So just because it was solved once doesn't also mean that it's actually better. I just got a text message from a family member that came in, and she thought things were better with her partner, and now they're telling it, no, I was just faking it this whole time. I'm like, And she thought that the negotiation, that they had actually come to some kind of agreement. Well, evidently not. Okay. So from their perspective, and I have no idea what's going on, but there's other things going on that, anyway. So building a golden bridge sounds really nice. It's got a beautiful ring to it. I would love to be able to do it more often. It takes work and it might not always be possible, but what I can do most of the time is listen to the other person and try to have a better understanding of what it is that their needs and interests are, and hopefully communicate in such a way that they can also understand what my needs and interests are if I don't have a third party present. If the third party's present, then they typically, if they're not just trying to come up with a solution really quickly to keep the people from going on strike and stopping us from being able to fly airplanes. I'm thinking about airplane strike, only thing about, you can't have a strike. It's like, oh, got to come up with a decision. If it's not having to make those kind of quick decisions, then if a third party can help actually be more of that balcony perspective. So, all right. Next week, remember, no official class. You've got some videos to watch. I hopefully by noon on Saturday, I'll have an outline for what you can take notes with from the readings. And then you'll be able to, if you want to use that, you can. So, any questions for me?
No, I don't have any here.
Okay. As we keep moving forward, and we're almost to the place where it seems kind of crazy when I think about it, it's almost the end of September, but we're getting to the place where kind of mid-semester. If there are things, and this would be true for the online people too, if there are things that you wish I would be doing differently, whether it be for the assignments or the readings or focus of the class. I can't completely change the focus of the class, but things that would help make your learning better. I would just give people permission to either reach out to me by email or make an appointment so that we can talk about how to make the learning experience better for you. And that would be true of the people that are online as well. So just give that opportunity. I can't always solve everything or make everything better, but if I can, I would like to be able to do that. So you all can let me know that as well. All right, I'll stay on here for a couple more minutes in case either one of you want to talk about individual things, but otherwise, I will see you in a couple of weeks.
Have a good night
You,
and enjoy your
yeah,
time away.
you ladies too.
Thank you.
You ladies as well. I got to run downstairs.
All right, take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. All right, can't tell if Kat is stuck or if she needs to talk. Kat, are you still there? I'll stop the recording.